Welcome back to Terror and Urban Myths, the show that explores the spooky stories that'll give you chills. If you're new here, we take legends and lore that listeners like you send in, and we dig up all the juicy details, the ones that make you want to sleep with the lights on.
And for our loyal listeners, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, and give this episode a like if you dare.
Tonight, we're diving into a haunting tale from Japan, the legend of Okiku, the well ghost. It's a chilling blend of history, heartbreak, and a thirst for revenge that just lingers across the centuries.
We're going to uncover the tragic fate of Okiku and the creepy events that followed her death. And as we go deeper into this legend, you might just notice some similarities to a certain iconic horror film. But more on that later.
Yes, first let's set the stage for this haunting tale. Okiku's story unfolds within the walls of Himeji Castle, a majestic structure in Japan that stood for centuries. Picture this, the year 1590. Inside the castle walls, there's this young woman named Okiku. She's a maid, known for her beauty and her hard work.
Oh, a samurai and a beautiful maiden. Sounds like the start of a classic tale of love and tragedy.
Indeed. And just like those classic tales, things are never as straightforward as they seem. Tetsuzan, even though he's already married, becomes obsessed with Okiku. He's totally captivated by her beauty, her spirit, and he wants her for himself. He offers her a life of comfort and luxury, but only if she agrees to be his mistress.
But Okiku, she wasn't the type to be easily swayed by those kind of offers, right?
You're absolutely right. Okiku, a woman with strong morals and unwavering loyalty, refuses his advances. But her rejection only makes his obsession worse, fuels his anger even more. He becomes determined to have her, no matter the cost.
So how does he react to her defiance? What does he do to try to force her?
He comes up with this cruel and cunning plan to trap her. He knows Okiku's in charge of the samurai's precious golden plates, so Tetsuzan secretly takes one, intending to frame her for the theft.
What a betrayal. He uses her job against her, knowing how bad the consequences could be.
Exactly. And back then, being accused of stealing from a samurai was a huge deal. Okiku facing the possibility of prison, torture, or even execution, she's truly desperate.
What options did she even have? Sounds like she was trapped.
Tragically, Okiku doesn't see any way out. Overwhelmed by fear and despair, she makes a heartbreaking decision. She ends her own life, throwing herself into the castle well, a final act of desperation.
Oh, that's just awful. But I have a feeling this isn't the end of the story, is it?
You're right. This is where things take a chilling turn. Okiku's death, filled with injustice and suffering, doesn't bring peace. It unleashes something powerful.
What happens? Does her spirit come back to get revenge on the man who wronged her?
That's exactly what many believe. In Japanese folklore, a spirit like Okiku's is known as a yurei. It's a restless spirit, stuck in the world because of unfinished business or a violent, unjust end.
I've heard of yurei before. They pop up in a lot of Japanese ghost stories and horror films.
Yep, they're a big deal in Japanese supernatural lore. These yurei are often depicted as women who died tragically and can't find peace. They come back to haunt those who hurt them, looking for payback.
And how does Okiku's yurei show itself? What form does her vengeance take?
She's said to appear as a ghost dressed in a white funeral kimono, her long, dark hair covering her face. But it's not just her appearance that's scary.
What else happens? What about Tetsuzan?
Tetsuzan, the man who caused her death, starts experiencing terrifying things. He has nightmares. He hears Okiku's voice echoing through the castle. Night after night, it drives him to the edge.
What does she do in these nightmares? Does she confront him directly?
She doesn't confront him. She does something much creepier. She counts. Slowly and deliberately, she counts those golden plates. Her voice, a haunting reminder of his betrayal and her pain. But her count always stops at 9. A constant reminder of that missing plate and the way he treated her.
That's so creepy.
Yeah.
Her spirit haunts him not with violence, but with the very task he used to manipulate her.
Exactly. The missing plate represents her unfinished business. It reminds him of the truth he tried to hide. And it's thought that because she didn't have a proper funeral, her soul is trapped. Her anger is shown through this haunting.
So it's not just revenge she wants. She wants acknowledgement, for him to admit what he did to her.
That's a really interesting point, and it adds another layer to this already fascinating legend.
What happens to Tetsuzan in the end? Does he ever find peace?
It depends on who you ask. Some say he died of a stroke, his face frozen in terror. Others say Okiku's spirit finally got him, dragging him down into that well with her.
It seems like he couldn't escape what he did. Now, you mentioned earlier there might be a connection between Okiku's story and a famous horror film. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. The legend of Okiku has some striking similarities with the Japanese horror film, Ringo. You probably know it as The Ring.
The Ring.
Yeah.
That movie is terrifying. The vengeful spirit, Samara crawling out of the well, and the TV, I still get chills thinking about it.
Right. If you think about both stories, there are some interesting parallels. Both have a vengeful female spirit who died unfairly. Both involve a well as a key location. And of course, both involve a curse that gets its victims after a certain amount of time.
Wow, I didn't realize how closely the film mirrors Okiku's legend.
It's pretty fascinating, right? While The Ring modernizes the story, using technology for the curse, the main idea of a vengeful spirit seeking justice stays the same.
So Okiku's tale, passed down for generations, might have been the inspiration for this modern horror classic.
It's definitely possible, and it shows the lasting power of these legends and the themes they explore.
We've covered a lot tonight, digging into the depths of Okiku's tragic story and its potential link to modern horror.
We'll be back after a short break to continue our exploration.
Before we go, a big thanks to all of you for listening to Terror and Urban Myths.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like if you're enjoying the show.
We'll be back soon to uncover more chilling tales and the beliefs behind them.
Welcome back to Terror and Urban Myths.
You know, it's amazing how a legend from 16th century Japan can still be so scary today.
Yeah.
What is it about Okiku's story that keeps us interested even now?
Well, one thing that makes it so interesting is that it's connected to a real place, Himeji Castle. This connection to history makes the legend feel more real, blurs the lines between fact and fiction.
It's like the castle itself becomes part of the story, holding all those memories and echoes of what happened there.
Exactly, and that mix of the real and the supernatural, that's what makes these kinds of stories so captivating. They make us think about the possibility of things existing beyond what we can see.
Yeah, like when you visit a historical place and you can almost feel the presence of the people who were there before you.
Precisely. And with Okiku, that presence is really strong because of the tragic events tied to her story.
We talked about how Okiku's legend is similar to the movie The Ring, but there are some differences too, right?
Yeah, one big difference is the type of curse. In Okiku's story, the haunting seems to be just in the castle, focused on Tetsuzan. Her spirit wants revenge, but she also wants people to know the injustice she suffered.
Right. In The Ring, the curse spreads through technology. It can affect anyone who watches the cursed videotape. It's more random and affects more people.
Exactly. And that difference highlights a key part of Japanese folklore and the idea of yurei. These spirits aren't just evil beings who want to hurt everyone. They're often driven by a need for justice, for someone to acknowledge their pain.
So even though their actions are terrifying, they're actually a way of communicating, a desperate attempt to be heard and understood.
Exactly. And this understanding adds another layer to Okiku's story. Her spirit isn't just trying to torment Tetsuzan. She wants to reveal the truth, to make sure her story isn't forgotten, and the wrong that was done to her is acknowledged.
So it's less about vengeful anger and more about wanting things to be set right.
That's a really perceptive point, and it reflects a core belief in Japanese culture, the connection between the spiritual and physical worlds. The things we do in this life can have consequences that carry over into the afterlife.
It's a reminder that our choices have a big impact, not just on ourselves, but on others, and even future generations.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes these stories so powerful. They remind us that we're all human, capable of both love and cruelty. They show us the strength of the human spirit even after death.
You know, it's interesting to think about the cultural context of Okiku's legend. The story takes place in 16th century Japan, a time with very different social norms.
Oh, definitely. And understanding those norms is crucial to understanding how vulnerable Okiku was, a young woman working in a powerful samurai's home. Her choices were limited, and her voice probably wouldn't have been heard against the authority of her master.
So refusing Tetsuzan's advances was a really risky thing to do.
Exactly. And the tragic consequences she faced show just how harsh life was back then and how little power women had. Her story is a warning, a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked, and how important it is to fight for justice, even when it seems impossible.
It makes you wonder if there were others like Okiku whose stories were never told, whose voices were silenced.
That's a thought-provoking point, and it underlines why it's so important to keep these legends alive, to give a voice to those who are ignored or forgotten by history.
These stories remind us that history isn't just about big events and famous people. It's also about regular people, their struggles, their victories, and their tragedies.
Absolutely. And by exploring these stories, we gain a deeper understanding of the past and its impact on us today.
You know, even though we're talking about the dark side of human nature and the potential for cruelty, it's important to remember that there's also hope in these legends.
Oh, What do you see as hopeful in Okiku's tragic story?
Well, even though Okiku died tragically, her spirit lives on, challenging those in power and seeking a form of justice. Her story is still told today, reminding us to speak truth to power and fight against what's wrong.
That's an interesting way to see it, and it shows the lasting power of these legends to inspire us, even centuries later.
It's like these stories help us deal with our own fears and worries, to face the darkness inside ourselves and in the world. And maybe through that, we can find a way to heal and have hope.
That's a profound thought, and it highlights the importance of continuing to explore these tales, to understand their deeper meaning and the lessons they hold for us today.
Exploring the legend of Okiku has been fascinating. It's a story that's both scary and makes you think. A story that still connects with people centuries later.
And it leaves us with so many questions. Could a real tragedy have inspired this legend? What does it tell us about the power dynamics of that time? And what can we learn from Okiku's strength in the face of injustice?
These are questions we can all consider as we think about the story and what it really means.
And when we return, we'll discuss the significance of wells in Japanese folklore and the rituals used to appease restless spirits like Okiku.
Welcome back to Terror and Urban Myths. We've been talking about the haunting legend of Okiku, a story of betrayal, injustice, and a restless spirit looking for peace. Before the break, you mentioned how important wells are in Japanese folklore. Can you tell us more about that? What's their role in these stories?
Well, you see, they hold this special place in Japanese culture and mythology. They're seen as liminal spaces, like thresholds between the world we live in and the world of spirits.
So they're not just creepy, dark places. They have a deeper spiritual meaning.
Exactly, and this makes them perfect for ghost stories, especially ones about yurei, spirits that are stuck in the physical world.
I can see how that connection would add to the feeling of fear and dread in Okiku's story. Her spirit trapped in the well. It's like a symbol of how she can't move on.
Precisely, the well is this constant reminder of her tragic death and the unresolved injustice that keeps her here.
We've talked about how Okiku's spirit wants acknowledgement for the wrong she suffered. Are there any rituals or practices in Japanese culture that try to appease these restless spirits?
Yes, there are a bunch of rituals and practices people believe can appease yurei and help them find peace. They often leave offerings of food, incense, or flowers at the places where they died.
So they do more than just try to calm the spirit or protect themselves from its anger.
Right, they try to connect with it, recognize its suffering, and offer a way to resolve things.
It's like they're not just trying to calm the spirit down, but to actually understand and acknowledge its pain.
That's a really insightful observation. These rituals highlight the importance of balance and harmony in Japanese spiritual beliefs. It's about restoring things to how they should be, not just for the spirit, but for the living as well.
It reminds us that what we do has consequences that go beyond our world. We have a responsibility to deal with injustice and seek forgiveness, even from those who are no longer with us.
That's a powerful thought, and it shows the wisdom that's been passed down through these ancient traditions.
Exploring the legend of Okiku has been a truly captivating experience. It's a story that's both chilling and makes you think. A story that still resonates with people centuries after it was first told.
And it leaves us with so many questions. Could this haunting legend be based on a real tragedy? What does it reveal about the power dynamics of that era? And what can we learn from Okiku's unwavering spirit in the face of such injustice?
These are questions for all of us to consider as we reflect on Okiku's story and its deeper significance, and as we wrap up our deep dive into Okiku's legend. We want to thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of terror and urban myths.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like if you enjoyed this episode.
Until next time, keep exploring the shadows, keep searching for the truth, and keep listening to the stories that whisper from beyond.